What's going on, guys? Time to look at the NBA betting market for January the 7th. Fat Guy, before we jump into today's games, I know there was a couple of cliffhangers you left us on
Yeah.
yesterday as far as the Knicks money line and the Bulls Kings OU. Why not start us off with the Knicks money line, which had the game total had 3,215 bets. Knicks open at plus 199. They were bet up to plus 257. They ended up receiving 26% of money line bets and 45% of the money. I think you were talking about the juice on this game, right? Like when people bought the juice.
Well, it seemed like a lot of bettors were betting the Knicks at plus 254. So I just want to know how efficient were those inferences? And I came up with average at best. If I do look at the line movement for the Knicks money line against Utah, it it hit highs of 267, right? So even at that 200 and plus 254, I guess kind of breakout, like where a lot of money seems to be placed, it still steadily went higher all the way. I mean, a couple peaks and valleys, but it went all the way up to 267, and then it went back down to 257. So they didn't get the exact best price but the reason I'm giving it average at best rather than a fail is that it was far better than the opening line of plus 199. And if you are a results-based person, the Knicks did win last night, correct, Big Rye?
They did win a handy win too.
So yeah, it's one of those things too. It's I don't know, like it's one of those ones where an underdog wins and you start to believe. You start to believe. And then I had one more question as well.
And that was on the Bulls Kings OU, which opened at 232. It was bet down to 229. The under only received 39% of bets, but it received 71% of the money, and the over hit handily as well in this game.
Yeah, I wanted to know if the over under bettors bet the over at 229 or somewhere between 229 and 232. And I'm thinking that it's more early, like 232 or 231 or 230, because we take a snapshot of these at about 10:30 Pacific time. So we're only seeing like about 25% of the market of its maturation. So in fact, it did shift downwards. So that unless it was a reverse line movement the whole way, chances are that the early bettors did bet the over, and then it did get some under action. But it did there were some shifts there as well. I mean, obviously, if you want to be results based, it doesn't matter what number you got. But again, it is going to matter,
Over the long term,
over the
betting
long term,
hundreds of possibly thousands of games, depending
if
on
not more,
how
tens of
dedicated
thousands.
you are.
Exactly. So there is all that stuff. So it did go down to 228, and it bounced, peaked a little bit at 228 and a half. And the over under finished with 61% the over, 39% the under. I would imagine the money's probably 50-50, but I think the early bettors bet the over and got a really bum line. So out of all of these early bets, I think there is some inefficiencies, and we shouldn't just count it all as sharp money. Because like I said, we're learning as we go, everybody. So on to the first game today, Big Rye.
I'm going to hide these games so we don't get confused. So we'll start off with the Sixers Nets. Sixers open as 2-point favorites. They've been bet down to 1-point favorites on the road. 1,475 bets so far on this game, and that line has moved in the favor of the Nets. They've received 53% of the bets and 41% of the money.
We got some RLM here, reverse line movement, stuff that is very interesting. So Sixers getting more money, not more volume, but more money. And that usually is the driving force to make, a Sixers line movement 2-3. And this money percentage would be, I would imagine, more significant because 1,475 bets at this stage is a lot more than we've seen lately, Big Rye, correct?
Yeah, that's one of the higher amounts. Usually it's between, look at those later games like 700-800. So anything over 1,000 when we make these recordings is usually a heavily bet game.
Yeah, exactly. So you could infer that the total amount of money bet on this game is probably higher than the other ones, just because, I mean, chances are there's more bets, chances are there's more money, right? Assuming things are congruent, there isn't necessarily a whale on one side or the other, or a series of whales. But this is a reverse line movement, so it does make it interesting. And a reverse line movement in what is probably going to be a very heavily bet game, because, if you bet almost double the amount in the early market, I would imagine the later market, you're probably going to get even more so. So this is also the first game of the week, or sorry, first game of the evening. So perhaps this will be the entry point for squares alike. So yeah, this is a reverse line movement in both markets, both the against the spread and the money line, which does make it interesting. And it does
on
look
the money line, the Nets have received 56% of the money, so it's not quite a reverse line movement. Like that market is actually quite even. The Nets have gone from plus 114 to plus 102, 41% of bets, but 56% of the money.
But I am saying congruently, because the spread is a more bet thing. So I would imagine that again, we're making inferences, right? I would imagine that it's trailing over there. Yes, that is probably, there is a bit of balancing there, but I still don't. It would be likely that there is more money against the spread. But however, though, there is the old NFL adage, and I'm not sure how this works with the NBA. When you're just getting like, between 1/2 and 2, or 1 and 2.5 points, you just take them to win. So perhaps this isn't a reverse alignment like Big Rye had mentioned, and everyone that was going to take the Knicks against the spread, they just took Knicks money line. But again, we're learning key numbers. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure whether it's better to take the money line or the spread in those close quarter situations.
Yeah, you mentioned exactly the thought that was going through my head. It feels like spread bettors are on the Sixers, money line bettors probably on the Nets. But the line has moved against the spread either way, so there has been probably more clout, let's say, that's come in on the Nets to help move those lines, and that's the reason why Fat Guy is seeing a reverse line movement there. The next up, we've got the OU for this game. It opened at 224. It's been bet up to 226. 78% of bettors have helped push that line up, but only 26% of the money on the over, despite that line moving up 2 points for the OU. So some interesting stuff going on there, Fat Guy.
Yeah, that looks like a reverse line movement as well, right? You know what? Like, if you're getting all this money on the under, why are you incentivizing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always find that interesting. Imagine you're one of the, because it's 3-1 money on under to over. Imagine you're one of the guys, and you're let's say you're a sharp guy and you're noticing this, and you do like the under. You think there's value on it, and then you and other like-minded guys bet that way, and then they move the line against you, knowing that you and other, let's call them sharps, what have you, do bet. I mean, I wonder if that feels demoralizing. You feel like more because what is it that I don't know what I don't know, right? So a little bit interesting here. So I would imagine that maybe there is a very sharp consensus on the over, perhaps to make it a little bit more difficult. But yeah, that's a bizarre one. But maybe there isn't as much as much action on this over under. But I find that hard to believe with 1,475 bets. So this is one to look for. I'm really curious if to see the result of this, right? And obviously you can't learn anything from one game, but that's why we're doing this every day, is to try and just glean a little bit of blood from the stone, just come up with some ideas, some inferences, and then back test them later with all the data that we've been accumulating this season and last.
Yeah, that's something you and I were talking about. So when we talk about like, oh, it's going to be interesting to see this result of this one game, it's not so much about this one result, like the Fat Guy just said. It's about taking these examples and extrapolating, out of all the data we're collecting, can we find out, maybe there's 40 games so far this year that fit this. So how do those 40 games go? And even something as little as 22 wins and 18 losses could be something where we end up being profitable over the long term. Obviously, a sample size of 40 isn't great, but it's better than a sample size of 1. Let's move on to the next game. 8 p.m. Eastern time start, 1,134 bets. So a lot of bets on this game as well between the Cavs and Grizzlies. Grizzlies opened up as 4-point favorites. They've been bet up to 5-point favorites and have received 61% of bets and 85% of the money. So quite a pretty a pretty stable market as far as the Grizzlies getting bets, getting money, and the line moving for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did want to circle back and touch one thing that you had mentioned is we're talking about positing theories and stuff like that and using a one game sample. One game doesn't mean anything, but one game can start to make you believe. And that's what it started with for me. My whole sports betting journey came down to a Bobcats Celtics game where the Celtics were a very, very strong team. Bobcats worst team in the league. The spread was very low. I didn't understand why. And then my sharp mentor, let's call him, said, trust me, you're going to want to be on the Bobcats on this one. And they smoked them. Now, does that mean anything? No. But that put a little thing in my brain is how did the worst team beat the best team and so easily? And how did he know? Well, he didn't really know. He just put his money on a reverse line movement, right? And he had a small extra indicator. It just takes one to kind of convince you and then start peeling the onion. And then here you are, you're sitting in your spare room in your underwear, making NBA market videos. And as far as the Cavaliers Grizzlies go, that's a pretty standard line movement. I mean, 4-5. There's nothing weird here like the past game. The one thing I do think is interesting though is it only moved almost less than a point here, Big Rye, considering the juice, right? So, yeah. But there's 1,134 bets. So again, this handle should be a little bit larger than usual for these types of bets. So why? I don't know. That's the only thing I can glean from it. That's a little bit of intrigue.
Let's move on to the money line market because the money line might be a little more interesting. The Grizzlies open -171. They've been bet up to -197, despite only receiving 33% of bets. But those 33% of bettors have put down 70% of the money on the Grizzlies, helping move that line up from -171 to -197.
Well, it's clear the pros like the Grizzlies, right? But it's and they like it at these prices too. But I'm just curious at how strong it is considering it, because these aren't massive movements, not like we've seen. They are movements nonetheless, though.
And then the OU for this game opened 213, bet down 4 points to 209. But there is heavy juice on the over at -112. 42% of bets on the over, 50% of the money on both sides.
That 4 points. That's a lot. I mean, it's not a true 4 points because, like you had mentioned, it's OU's 209 -112 on the over, right? So it really incentivizing that under. Maybe they really like the chances of it landing between 209 and 213. That might be an idea. A Vegas middle, as Big Rye likes to call it. 50% of the money though. So I'm wondering where this is going to go from here. Maybe it stabilizes at 210 even money, Big Rye. Let's make a little forecast here.
Yeah, I think that's pretty safe to say. It's one of these markets where the bets and the money percentage is so even that it's something that when you and I look at this, it's just there's nothing to glean from it, and we'd move on to the next opportunity.
The one idea though is why are they incentivizing the under so much? Is that how bad of a number is 209, right? Because you don't even have to. You can at plus 101 juice, you can be slightly worse than 50% and still profit. So that makes me think how bad is the number 209? Because their standard commission, if you were to take that, is it 209 a 45% chance of hitting under 209? What is it? How key is 209? That's the question I have going forward.
Next up, we have the Mavs Nuggets. It's a 10 p.m. Eastern time start. 870 bets so far on this late game. Nuggets opened as 3.5-point favorites. They've been bet down to 3-point favorites. 52% of the money or 52% of bets on the Nuggets, but 76% of the money on the Nuggets, despite the line moving in favor of the Mavericks.
Well, we got reverse line movement again, and it's half a point, so I don't know how significant it is, and I'm not sure when this money came in. And also, too, we'd been talking about handles of games. Well, those games are all in the thousands. The previous two, this one's 870, so I would imagine this is a little bit less. So perhaps the threshold hasn't necessarily been crossed, but it is in reverse. So, it is again something to watch out for. Perhaps the Mavericks, right? And don't forget too, the money line. It's not like they're balancing there. They also have a little bit more money on the Nuggets. That can be deceiving though, only because uh, technically you're going to pay out more with the Mavericks winning, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, the bet percentages are almost spot on for the money line as far as Nuggets minus 150, 62%. However, there is more money on the Mavericks, so there is a little bit more exposure on the books for the Mavericks on the money line. However, the Nuggets spread, there's a lot more there as well. So this is one of those Vegas middling opportunities where if the Nuggets win by 1 or 2 points, possibly 3, depending on when the money came down on the Nuggets against the spread, the Vegas is going to make out like gangbusters in this game.
Yeah, what Big Rye's saying is the Nuggets winning by 1 or 2 will allow them to take advantage of the money line market, considering they're taking exposure on the Mavericks. Conversely, though, the 1 or 2 would allow the Mavericks to cover while they're taking exposure on the Nuggets. So they probably, in all likelihood, it's equally balanced, so that every other result they'll probably make a small commission. But on the Nuggets finishing by 1 or 2, they're kind of getting what's called a free roll, where there's a low chance of it happening, but if it does, they're going to make a serious amount on considering they'll take the good side of both markets.
And then the OU for this game opened 226. It's been bet down to 223. 26% of bettors on the under, but 63% of the money has helped push that line down 3 points from 226 to 223.
This is probably the worst number I would imagine that I've seen come out since we've been doing this, because there's no funny business. This is just money pushing this down, as far as I can see, at least. And 226 is probably a really bum number, I'm guessing. So I don't know how much meat on the bone is at 223, but it does. It will cause me to take a second look at this when this broadcast concludes.
Next up, we have the T-Wolves Trailblazers 10 p.m. Eastern Time start as well. 756 bets on this game. Trailblazers open as 10-point favorites. They still are 10-point favorites despite the juice moving in favor of the T-Wolves. And interesting note on the T-Wolves side, 54% of bettors, but 75% of the money is on the T-Wolves. Not enough to push the line off of 10, but the juice definitely moved.
Yeah, absolutely. This might be lateral too, because don't forget, this handle is going to be the lowest in theory, because it has the lowest amount of volume at 756 bets. So chances are that's the least amount of money. And consequence, then the money percentage carries less weight. I mean, that's a lot of mental gymnastics, but we're going to be able to do this. We're going to be able to keep up. So it probably didn't cross a threshold. So this is probably the furthest you can push the 10 number before you move it to 10.5, I would imagine, at minus 113. Because I don't remember seeing that quite that high a juice as far as spread betting juice is concerned. This looks almost balanced, though, this Timberwolves Trailblazers money line, though, as far as payouts, Big Rye.
Yeah, I was looking at that, too. The Trailblazers open minus 480. They bet down to minus 457, which is pretty much shows you what the juice is worth against the spread there, moving it, whatever it is, 8 points or so. 42% of bettors are on the Trailblazers, so more people hoping for that T-Wolves upset. However, 82% of the money on the Trailblazers, which is pretty close to that minus 457. So this T-Wolves Trailblazers, even though the money percentages look way out of whack, it's really a 50-50 game. So really, against the spread, they're taking the books are taking risks on the T-Wolves covering 10 points.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess the Trailblazers covering more or less would probably be the best result, because they've probably locked up a guaranteed commission. We don't have the exact math in front of us, because they not only that is we just have a money percentage. We don't have the dollars. Like, you could extrapolate certain things, but again, we're making inferences in these videos and trying to use a little Bayesian dart throwing statistics over the year to try and center on what is actually true. So this market, despite looking completely crazy, like Big Rye said, is probably more in line, because you need more guys. You need more money on the favorite, because if the dog covers, then you're out of pocket, right? And like Big Rye, they're only taking, I would imagine, considering 756 bets, like I said, in theory, a lower handle, very minor exposure on the Timberwolves at plus 10.
and the OU opened 232. It's been bet up to 233. 75% of bettors are on the over, but as far as the money percentages, as far as they're telling us right now, 99% of the money on the under. Fat Guy, can you put weight into this? Like, do you believe that it's 99 to 1 right now?
Nah, that seems a little bit off. You and I both feel that way. So I'm not as confident in the money percentage, but we'll take a look at it over time and see if it stabilizes. But I'm not sure that figure is accurate, despite not what we're reporting. A third party is reporting.
10 p.m. Eastern time start for the Spurs-Lakers, the final game on our docket. 945 bets. The Lakers opened as 7-point favorites. However, they've been bet down to minus 5.5-point favorites. 52% of bettors and 74% of the money has helped move the Spurs line down from 7 to 5.5.
It's clear pros and some Joes alike are on the Spurs. I mean, I would imagine the Joes being Laker fans, like that. Just the Lakers are who, the Patriots? What's our NFL comparison here?
The Lakers,
Tom Brady Patriots?
I'm going to say the current Green Bay Packers.
Okay, that's not. I feel it's stronger than that.
Maybe Chiefs.
Chiefs, yeah, they're the Chiefs. There we go. Why did we bounce around and miss that? Lakers are the Chiefs, yeah. So I would imagine that they're going to have unbridled enthusiasm on them for pretty much the whole year. Except for, like, there is going to be slumps. Like, you're way more likely to lose a few basketball games than you are a football game, just the way it is. But the Lakers are going to have strong public contention. That's why I'm wondering, like, maybe we missed the boat on the Spurs, perhaps, if you did like them. But there's going to be chance to get buyback, I would imagine, with probably overwhelming public support, because this is the most primetime game. It only has 945 bets now, which is lower than I would expect, right? Like, I would imagine, like, Big Rye does have some Big Rye and I do have some proprietary statistics that do encompass public sentiments as far as team goes, and I would imagine the Lakers finish number one in most categories by the end. But this is why we're doing this, because we don't actually know. Does seem like a natural trend, but I do feel like the book is taking exposure. So, like we had mentioned, usually you want money on the more money on the favorite when you're taking money line bets, but the dog is getting 70% of the money on the money line, right? Yeah. So they have no choice. This is probably too much exposure, or not too much. It's not. They probably want to take less than they actually are, so they're going to probably drive the Spurs price down until they can almost flip that money percentage. Not quite, but I don't know if they're going to be able to do it, right? So
I think they will, because we're talking about one of the most public teams out there, one of the most public players probably of all time, LeBron James.
The most, as far as betting markets are concerned.
Yeah, so I could see a lot more of the public, a lot more money coming in on the Lakers as tip-off approaches. I think this is a lot of sharp money on the Spurs. This is one of the things that Fat Guy and I tend to disagree about. This is like one of the only things, because he's going to say that the value is gone on the Spurs, or possibly gone with it moving down half a point and the money line moving.
Yeah.
To me, this is a really nice indicator to say, okay, this is an opportunity to take the Spurs. So it just depends the philosophy you have and how you want to approach it. I feel like I'm still going to be swimming above water, I guess you could say, or in the green. However, you still are missing some of that opportunity, because you're going to be missing out on a few percentage points because over a huge sample, the Spurs, they could still lose by 6 a handful of times, and yes. I would lose, and the Fat Guy would win if he was able to get that line at 7.
Yes.
So it's one thing that you have to take into consideration, and something that we will hopefully be able to track and find out what the differences are betting early spreads and being on the right side of those spreads, and what indicators can maybe help you get on the right side of getting those numbers. But we pretty much talked about this game quite a bit, so let's skip over the money line and just go straight to the OU. 222, bet up to 223. 74% of bets are on the over. However, 97% of the money is on the under.
Now, I'm not necessarily believing the 99% on the Trailblazers, Timberwolves under from before, but I kind of believe this 97.3. I'll tell you why, because chances are, if you're going to take the Spurs, the lower the score, the lower the percentages, the more that would favor an underdog. So that tends to positively correlate with the under. So Spurs and under is more likely, and Lakers and over is also more likely, whereas less likely ones are Spurs and over and Lakers under. Obviously, Lakers under and Spurs over can still happen, but they're less likely than those other two. However, this 97% is an indicator to me that's even stronger that this is probably going to be a large Spurs play for a lot of it. This might be the biggest pro play so far this year. It looks like, just because every indication is that they like the Spurs and the under, and the Spurs even more so. So I think this correlates with strong feelings on the Spurs. This under number, it did move up though. That's the one tricky thing.
Yeah, especially with the juice being on the over two at minus 110. So it's one of those things where some of these markets, and if you guys are watching this video, like, it's stuff that we can follow along and kind of learn together to see what this stuff means. So we're just trying to pull out the anomalies and go why is 97% of the money on the under, but they're moving the line up and the juice is on the, like, they're encouraging us to take the under at 223 at even money. Like, you only have to be right 50% of the time. If I bet the over, I have to be right 52.4% of the time to break even. So a lot of exposure on the under. However, they're moving that line up to hopefully get more bettors on the that
was a good over. One. Not Hall of Fame or anything.
Yeah.
The don't forget too though, you can probably just callously move an over under line in one of these public games, because Joe's bet, Squares bet overs. It's just as old as time. They like it. They like high scoring. It's what they cheer for. Because, like I said, you have to be a real cynic to be like, I hope he misses this shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And not only that, not missing shots, slow possessions, long possessions. Like, it's a cynical game.
I'm just trying to see. The Spurs Lakers they've already played twice this year. 121-107 was the first score, so that game would have been over, and 109-103, so that game would have been under.
Did Lakers win both games?
The Lakers won both games. They won by
more likely than
14, and they won by 6.
So I feel like they 109-103 on one of them too.
Yep.
Interesting stuff. Spurs losing both is probably helps the case of the makes me at least lean to them a little bit more. But we're not here for predictions. We're here for market stuff. So
that's it for the January 7th NBA betting market video. Good luck in your wagers for January the 7th.